This is John Musgrave. Thank you for coming to the podcast. If you like this content or this episode, please click like or even subscribe or hit that thumbs up button on your screen, and that'll help more people find us. Thanks for listening. So we continue on this week talking about Obadiah, and so that's what's on the screen here. This is the last slide we were looking at last week. And so we were talking about who can remember? I know it's been a week and we got Christmas time, and Betsy and I were just talking about how, we had busy weeks this week, and you guys probably did too. Except for Brenda. She didn't have to clean her house because it's always clean. And she knew everyone was coming over there last night. What was going on with Obadiah? Why is he writing? What are the historical circumstances that Obadiah addresses? And we've kind of said it here, but
the Edomites were celebrating Judah being exiled.
yeah. So the Edomites were celebrating Judah being exiled. What were they doing at the when Babylon was coming into Judah and then destroying Jerusalem? What were the Edomites doing during that time? Well, the final little towns and then Jerusalem itself is just conquered and wiped out, and the temples burned down by the Babylonians. What were the Edomites doing?
Mocking.
Besides celebrating and mocking. And they were doing both of that.
Looting.
They were looting. They were glad that the people were scattering and running out into the countryside. They were going in and stealing the stuff from the homes. Looting the Judahites there. Okay, and so Obadiah writes, and he's writing to these people who had experienced this, who were now in Babylon. And so how are the Edomites related to the Israelites? Cousins, yeah. And who are the cousins? Who are the ancestors who were brothers? Jacob and Esau. Okay, so these are the Israelites are the descendants of Jacob, and the Edomites are the descendants of Esau. And so they're given this relationship, and you see this in Genesis, that they're to be brotherly toward each other. And you see that in this ultimate, in Genesis, this is what Moses is instructing the people who've come out of Egypt. Deal with Edom, deal with Esau in a brotherly way. Because even though we stole his birthright, but he did that of his own free will, so it is rightly ours. He freely chose to give me the birthright, chose to give me the rights of the firstborn son, chose to give me the inheritance, the blessings of the covenant. He freely did that. He viewed stew as more important. Okay? Now, yeah, the matter of, I guess, inheritance, Jacob was a little bit deceptive. But nonetheless, Isaac blessed Jacob and not Esau. And Esau, when he came back and said, isn't there a little bit of blessing left for me? What's Jacob say? Sorry, dude. Yes. No, there's not. And so Israel is to know that the promised land is not for Edom. They were not to intermix with them in marriage. Edom was given a different land, but yet they were to have a brotherly relation to them, because when Jacob comes back into the country after like 21 years or something, what happens between Jacob and Esau? They hug each other, yes. Esau gives Jacob a warm reception.
He's scared, though.
Yeah. Jacob was scared. He comes in, he's scared, and he puts all these servants in front of him with gifts to butter up Esau so that the two nations would not be at war. But Esau says, "Oh, you can keep your gifts. We're okay. We're fine. I've got plenty. I'm blessed. You take the promised land. I've got plenty of stuff. I don't need your goats and donkeys and the things you've sent to me." Yeah.
Really rubbed it in there at the end.
Yeah.
I don't need your stuff because I got your stuff.
Yeah, and so they're both blessed, but separate. And when Esau invites Jacob to join in with him, Jacob says, I'll catch up with you later. But does he?
No.
No, where's he go instead? Instead of going into the land of Edom, where's he go?
Promised land.
He goes back into the promised land where he belongs. Okay, so Edom and Israel are to have these brotherly relations with each other. And so it's bad that Edom, at the time of exile, is mocking, is rejoicing, and is looting their brothers. Okay, their cousins. Okay, so the purpose of Obadiah, this is what we talked about last week. Let's just get a couple of readers on this real fast. So Mallory and Betsy and Bob, those three dots for us.
To teach the newly exiled Judahites to take comfort and hope
In their future grand restoration of the promised land and
in light of Edom's joyous participation in Jerusalem's downfall and Edom's future judgment.
Okay, so even though you've been exiled, that's the first part. Point one, you'll have a future grand restoration to the promised land. Okay, again, this theme that we see through the prophets. God would not abandon his people forever. And that after their punishment, they would be returned to the promised land. By the way, Betsy, Joyce, and I are singing Handel's Messiah tonight at 7:30 in Cary. And it's a big production with some orchestra and soloists and that kind of thing. Joyce is doing all this. No, we're not doing the solos. We're just in the choir. If you want to see Messiah performed, there are 2 extra tickets among us. And so if 2 of you want to come tonight, you can. If not, we're not insulted. We're just doing that. But Handel's Messiah is just quoting all these Old Testament things about Jesus. But a lot of the stuff is coming from Isaiah, but it's coming from the return from exile. So comfort ye my people. This is Isaiah talking about you'll return from exile to the promised land. And the soloist on that is just fantastic. Oh, so good. But there'll be a future grand restoration, and Isaiah talks about this a lot amongst chapters 40 through 66. That third section of Isaiah. But it's something that a lot of the prophets are dealing with. That God's people will not be just abandoned by God, left in exile, but that he'll gather them back from the nations. Okay, how is God gathering his people from the nations today?
The church.
Through the church, yeah. And then second thing, purpose of Obadiah, in light of Edom's joyous participation in Jerusalem's downfall, he tells them God will judge Edom for their doing this. And in part, he judges them through Babylon right after their looting, before the return from exile. He does it. Babylon conquers Edom. It's one of the nations that Babylon conquers. And so God just assures them, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord, right? Which is from Isaiah, but quoted by Paul in Romans 12. And Obadiah has this message too. I know these guys abused you, and they shouldn't have because they're your brothers, but I'll take care of them. Just rest. Don't worry about judging them. You're not the judges. I am, and I will judge them for their mocking you, for their laughing at you, for their celebrating over your demise, and for their looting your stuff. I'll take care of them. So that's Obadiah. That's why he writes the book. God writes this book to give them encouragement as they've just arrived in their and they're settling in their new homes in exile. Okay, new stuff for us. So notes on the book. Jim, can you read our first bullet?
Other prophets speak on the topic of Edom at 586 and God's future vengeance upon the nation.
Okay, so this is not something that is just in the book of Obadiah. It's something that comes up in all these different places. I think I got them all here. Ezekiel 35 is a big section about how God's going to get Edom because Edom rejoiced at the Edom rejoiced at the downfall of Judah. He deals with it in Ezekiel 25, verses 12 through 14. Deals with it in Isaiah 34. And this is, when Isaiah's writing it, it's predictive because Isaiah's writing before Babylon's even a power, but he tells that Edom will go against you, they'll rejoice over your downfall, but God will bring about their downfall as well. Jeremiah deals with it in 49, 7 through 22, and then it's dealt with in Psalm 137, 7. Psalm 137 is a psalm written from exile, from the rivers in Babylon, where God's people are being mocked by Babylonians. And they say, sing us the songs of Zion. And just in their humiliation, they're being humiliated and mocked by Babylonians. And Psalm 137 is a psalm out of that. But there's this reference to God repaying in judgment Edom for their bad attitude and bad actions toward their brothers in 586. Okay, so those are some places that you see this theme as well, but Obadiah is a big one there. Okay, another set of notes on the book here. Let's see, Christina.
The restoration of Israel, 538, destruction of Edom and other enemy nations is spoken of as a day of the Lord.
Okay, so we've talked about this a lot through the prophets. Actually, it's something that Moses starts talking about. He says, in the latter days, these things will happen. And so we see these things that God identifies as days of the Lord in the Old Testament. Now, what's the final day of the Lord? Yeah, Jesus coming back, gathering people unto final judgment, judging the wicked, casting them into the lake of fire, and making everything, all the things that we see, new in the new heavens and new earth. So that's the final day of the Lord. But the Old Testament is very clear about defining things that are happening in the Old Testament as days of the Lord. And what are the elements? There are two major elements that we see in days of the Lord. What happens in a day of the Lord? Okay, so God, the major thing, the overriding thing, is that God visits. He comes. He doesn't. Now, God's over everything, and he's letting things go on. He's sovereign, but he's letting things go on. But at certain times, he comes and he visits. And we know that language from Scripture. You know, I will visit my people. I will visit them. And he visits in two different ways. And I heard that amongst you as I asked you this. What's one way? What's the nice way he comes and visits? He comes he comes in blessing. He visits and he distributes blessing. Now, ideally, this is to his people for their obedience. I will visit my people. And he comes to bless them. And when he does that, at the same time, when he comes to visit, he blesses his people. And then what's the other side of what he does when he visits? Curses, judgment on my people's enemies. And so that's what we see in the Old Testament. When God has a day of the Lord, he visits, and he visits in blessing and judgment. Blessing upon those who love him, who have looked to him, who are following him, and curses and judgment on those who have been hassling his people. Now, sometimes God comes in 586, God comes, and that's a day of the Lord. And who are the enemies of God at the day of the Lord in 586? God's people. And that's what he says through his prophets. He says to them, you ought not to be saying, bring on the day of the Lord, Lord, visit us, because you're so wicked. When I visit, you are my enemies, and I will visit you in judgment. Okay, so don't say day of the Lord, because if I come now in your unrepentant state, you'll be the recipients of curse. And in 586, who gets the blessings? Babylon. Babylon is God's instrument as he communicates time after time in the prophets. Babylon is his instrument to institute his covenant faithfulness curses on his own people. From Deuteronomy 28 and Leviticus 26, the list of blessing and curses. and he uses Babylon. So this is the conversation between Habakkuk and God. God says, there will be a day of the Lord, and Babylon will be blessed. And you, Judah, whom you've just told me is wicked, and I agree, will be cursed. So 586, day of the Lord, Babylon is blessed. They prosper. They just walk through Judah and they conquer all the towns. They climb up the hills of Jerusalem and they conquer it, and they demolish the walls, not one stone left on another. They demolish the temple, not one stone left on another. They burn up what's left in the temple. They burn the houses in Jerusalem. They just, it's like the Jedi in episode 1. Just everything before them. They're just conquering, right? No disturbance in the force. They're just wiping that's why I like you should like episode 1 more. No opposition. They're just kicking tail. But then in the Restoration, 538, there's another day of the Lord. And who's blessed and who's cursed in 539, 538 in that day of the Lord? Who's cursed? Babylon is. And who's his instrument for cursing Babylon? Persia. And Isaiah mentions Cyrus by name. And he calls him my Messiah, my anointed one. Okay, so anyone who's anointed in the Old Testament, that's the word Messiah. Okay, and so when anyone's anointed, a prophet, a priest, or a king, they're a Messiah, they're anointed one. It's not saying they're the divine second person of the Trinity, eternally existing like Jesus is. Jesus is all that, divine, eternally existing God, second person of the Trinity. He's also the anointed king who gets anointed by John the Baptist to be that special king over God's people forever, to fulfill the Davidic covenant promise that God's people would always have a son of David to reign over them forever. Okay? But God anoints people to do different things, and he anoints Cyrus, king of Persia, to conquer Babylon, and Persia's foreign policy is different than Babylon's. Babylon's foreign policy, we know historically, they conquered somebody and they exiled them, brought them to their own nation. But Persia's foreign policy is different. Anyone recall what Persia's foreign policy is and what Cyrus or Darius is his other name? One of them's a throne name. Darius and Cyrus, same guy. Darius, the one that has Daniel in the lion's den and rejoices when Daniel survives. Yeah, Matthew.
They maintain peace by returning people to their land, but then subsequently demanding tribute and taxation.
Yes. So Persia's view was, when we conquer a nation, let them live in their land, but just have them pay taxes to us. And so Cyrus comes in, and this is the handwriting on the wall in Daniel chapter 5. Cyrus comes in, he conquers Belshazzar there, and then he sends the Judahites back. He sends the exiles back, and they come back to the promised land. And so that's the day of the Lord. So Cyrus is the instrument, Persia is the instrument of the cursing on Babylon, but the recipient of the blessings are God's people. And they're blessed by being released from their captivity. Okay, a repeat of Egypt and Moses. Okay, they're released from their captivity and they're brought back into the promised land to enjoy blessing there. Okay, so that's the day of the Lord. You got two different days of the Lord happening in Obadiah, and we can look and read it there. And if you're on Obadiah in your Bibles, read it in your Bibles so that you can see it there in your Bibles. I also have printed it up here, but let's go ahead and read this. How about this? Can we have Dakota read verse 15 and Anna read verse 16, and then Randy and Laura take 17 and 18 for us. Obadiah is one chapter, so it's just verses. So 15, Dakota.
The day of the Lord is near for all nations. As you have done, it will be done to you. Your deeds will return upon your own head.
Just as you drank on my holy hill, so all the nations will drink continuously. They will drink and be as if they had never been.
But on Mount Zion will be deliverance. It will be holy, and the house of Jacob will possess its inheritance.
The house of Jacob will be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. The house of Esau will be stubble, and they will set it on fire and consume it. There will be no survivors from the house of Esau. The Lord has spoken.
Okay. So no survivors from the house of Esau. And verse 15, this is a day of the Lord. Okay, does this have, now don't mortar shell here, does this have anything to do with Jesus as Obadiah is talking about this? No. What nations does this have to do with? Edom
Judah.
and Judah. Yeah. And in the background, who's doing all the destructive work here? Babylon. Yeah. So they're crushing Edom and doing all in the background. It doesn't say the word Babylon there, so you won't see it up there. But God's going to bring deliverance, and Persia's in the background there too, because all this is kind of smashed together. You got on the one hand, Edom's being destroyed by Babylon, but Mount Zion there'll be deliverance. Look at verse 16. What's God's holy hill? That's a technical term meaning a particular place. Jerusalem. Jerusalem is God's holy hill. So when you see Mount Zion or my holy hill, that's Jerusalem. Jerusalem's a city on a hill, and it's where God's holy presence is. It's the city God has set apart, holy, set apart for himself. In verse 17, you see on Mount Zion there will be deliverance. Okay, so that's speaking of their return. It will be holy. It'll be set apart again. It wasn't holy when the Babylonians went in there and went in on the temple grounds and walked in the tabernacle and destroyed it and knocked down its walls. It was common and profaned. But he's saying it's going to be holy again. And Jacob will possess its inheritance. Who's Jacob? Israel. Yeah, the nation of Israel. And what's Israel's inheritance? The promised land in Jerusalem. Yeah. And so this is saying you will possess it. You will live in the promised land again. Okay, so do you see this is all just historical stuff here that Obadiah is talking about? Okay, good. Well, let's pick up with this next week. Just a tiny bit to go, and then we'll move on from Obadiah next week. But we'll cover this last slide next week. All right. Well, let's pray.